Isn't God good? Aren't you glad to be in his house today? I have really enjoyed the last couple of weeks, and I'm glad to be with you this week. This is my final week for a little while, at least, to be with you. Someone asked me earlier who's going to be here next week, and I'll just be honest with you. I turned 60 about a week ago, and I can't for the life of me remember. What? Mel Rich, thank you, David. Mel Rich will be here with you. He's wonderful. And then it sounds like you're going to have an amazing day on Easter with now a full breakfast instead of just a continental. I know that I attend the Wildemar Grace Point Church, and I know that anytime we have a good potluck with our Hispanic congregation, our English congregation, that's pretty much a piece of heaven, I think. So I'm looking forward to what you're going to have and we're going to have up there. So I'm glad to have this opportunity one more time to help you to hear the hope that's in Jesus. And I want to do that a little bit by looking at Moses. We're going to look at a couple of pieces of his life, a couple of things that happened in his life. I think the first one is going to be familiar. It's the burning bush story, narrative. The other one's a little bit more obscure, but I think you're gonna like it. We need to understand a little bit about Moses. When you say Moses to Christians, they're like, oh, okay, he's a good guy. He gave the Ten Commandments. It's a good guy. When you talk about Moses to a Jew, you are talking about the guy. You're not talking about just one, there's David, and there's Solomon, and there's Moses. All those other guys are down here, and Moses is like head and shoulder. For the Jews, Moses is like Jesus for the Christians. I mean, it's that kind of a big thing. And so we get to this story of Moses, and we know the story of Moses. Every Jew knew the story of Moses, but we also know it. And we know about his birth, and Pharaoh getting nervous about all the Israelites and saying, we're going to kill all the boys under 2. Moses' mom doesn't think that's a great idea, so she hides him in a basket in the river, and Pharaoh's daughter finds him and brings him home. There's a little girl standing there and says, hey, if you need a wet nurse, I know someone. And so Moses' mother is his wet nurse as he grows up, bringing him up in this idea of who he is as an Israelite, even though he is the grandson to the Pharaoh, who probably at that point was the most powerful person on earth. So when we look at Moses, we got to understand he comes from a place of privilege. He comes from the palace in Egypt, and he knew the guy that could change the world in Pharaoh. But he also knew the one who could change the world in God. And we know the story of one day Moses walking along and seeing one of the overseers beating an Israelite slave, and Moses confronts him and says, hey, quit that. And the overseer says, what are you going to do? Because he doesn't really know who Moses is. And Moses ends up killing him. And he goes back to the palace. He hides the body. He goes back to the palace thinking he's safe. And he's out walking along the same place the next day, and the slaves there were fighting with each other this time. He said, hey, you need to knock this off. Come on, what are you doing? And they say, well, why should we listen to you? What are you going to do, kill us too? And Moses panics because people know that he killed the overseer. So now he's got, what am I going to do? I don't think Grandpa's going to take care of me at this point. And so he takes off and runs into the wilderness, finds a place to work, and he gets to be a shepherd. Now, here's what we need to understand about shepherds in that day. And to understand shepherds, you need to understand sheep a little bit. Anyone ever spent any time with sheep? Can I tell you something about sheep? Sheep stink. They smell horrible. And they're really kind of stupid. I mean, they'll kind of do whatever the leader says, but they're kind of stupid and they stink. And shepherds spent so much time with the sheep that they had the aroma of lamb around them all the time. And it wasn't like your high society kind of job. It wasn't that job that you think, oh, man, if I could just be a shepherd, my life would be complete. People looked down on them. They were the amazing thing about the story of Jesus' birth is that the first people that really hear about the birth of Jesus are the lowest of the low of society. But Moses becomes a shepherd. He goes from the palace, the highest place you could be, to walking around with stinking sheep. One day he's out walking around with his sheep, and he looks over and he sees a bush on fire. Now, not really uncommon in that area. There's a certain kind of bush that suddenly I'm not remembering the name of. Like I said, I turned 60 a couple of weeks, and evidently the first thing that went was my memory. But they can spontaneously combust out in the heat of the desert. And so it wasn't an everyday kind of thing, but it wasn't like unheard of that he would look out and see a bush burning. But usually the bushes would catch on fire, and we know what happens when plants catch on fire. We've watched the hills around here. We've seen how it burns, and I mean the climate actually in Israel is fairly similar to here, and I know he was not in Israel at this point, but it's a little bit like being out in the Anzo Borrego desert, kind of just trying to tie it in for everyone here. That kind of climate, and so he sees this burning bush, and he says, oh, look, a burning bush, okay, whatever. And he looks back a little bit later, and he's like, wait, it's still burning. That's unusual. And he looks back a little bit later, and he says, that is still burning. Maybe I should check out and see what's going on. I mean, there's not a danger of wildfire there because you have to have plants next to each other for there to be wildfire. But he says, this is unusual. I think I'll go check it out. And he goes to this bush that's burning. And as he gets close to it, he hears a voice say, Moses. Moses. And Moses says, here I am. And the voice says, Moses, take off your sandals, for you're on holy ground. Moses at this point has figured out that this is not your normal burning bush. He's begun to figure out that something different is happening here. And Moses takes off his shoes and he goes over near the burning bush. And the voice says, Moses, go and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. And Moses thinks, well, they all know I'm a murderer, and I got to tell Grandpa that he's got to let all of the unpaid labor for the country go? There's millions of Israelite slaves at this point. I got to tell Grandpa that? God, what do I tell them when they don't believe me? Moses, what's that in your hand? Well, it's a rod, a shepherd's rod. Moses, throw it on the ground. But God, you ever said that? But God, you don't understand. You don't understand. You see, the rod, the shepherds had two tools. They had a a staff and a rod. A staff is that hooky thing that we're used to seeing, that you can pull sheep back. The rod is a defensive weapon and sometimes an offensive weapon. It's a longer stick with a big head on it so that when something comes for your sheep, you swing it and you hit them with it. Because it's about protecting the sheep. And so Moses says, God, you don't understand. This is my only piece of security out here. Any animal could get me, anything. This is my security. This is my rod. If I throw it down, I'll be vulnerable. Moses, throw it down. But God, out here, a man needs security. Throw it down, Moses. But God, I had to run away from the palace. I had everything, and now the only thing that I can really call mine is my rod. It's the only thing. Don't take from me the only thing that I can call mine. Moses, throw it down. And we know what happened. Moses looked at the rod and he threw it down, and it became a snake ready to strike, the Bible tells us. And Moses did what any sensible person would do. He ran the other way because he was afraid. And I think he was afraid of the snake. Let's just be honest. He was afraid of the snake, but I also kind of wonder if he was afraid of what God was going to do, what God was going to truly do when he really got a hold of Moses. Moses, pick it up by the tail. God, you just don't understand. You never pick up a hissing snake by the tail. You get a stick and you pin the head to the ground and you think really, really hard about whether you want to touch it. Moses, pick it up by the tail. But God, I could die. Moses, pick it up by the tail. And we know what happened. Moses reached down. You sure? Really? And as soon as his hand touched the snake, it became a rod again. And so the first thing that I want to tell you today is that where God guides, he provides. Where God guides, he provides. Exodus 3:10, God says to Moses, "So now go, I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." And he gives him a rod. And I don't know that we really think about it very much, but when Moses threw it down, it was the rod of Moses. But when Moses picked it up, it was no longer the rod of Moses, it was the rod of God. It is from there on in the Bible referred to as the rod of God. And what happens is, with the rod of Moses, when you hit a rock, your arms hurt. But with the rod of God, when you hit a rock, water streams out that's enough for 3 million people. So we're not talking a trickle. And with the rod of Moses, when you raise your arms in front of a body of water, your arms get tired. But with the rod of God, when you raise your arms in front of a body of water, the Red Sea parts, the Israelites cross, Moses drops his arms, and the Egyptians are wiped out. The rod of God represents the presence and power of God in the life of Moses. So I have a question for you today. What's that in your hand? What's that in your hand? What is that thing for you that represents security? That represents life? That you think, man, as long as I've got this, I'm okay. As long as I can do this, I'm okay. As long as I have this amount in my checking account, it's okay. As long as my investment account looks like this, it's okay. As long as I have this relationship in my life, it's okay. What's that in your hand? And I don't want you to hear the voice of wink when I say this, but I really believe that today, the voice of God is saying to you, throw it down. Throw it down on the ground so that you can pick it up, not as yours, but as God's. What's that in your hand? Throw it down. I want to look at another thing that happened in Moses' life. They're getting ready to go in the promised land. And Moses has a conversation with God. My point, if you're taking notes, is that when we wait, God abides. Probably pretty important for a church in this situation to hear this today. When we wait, God abides. Exodus 33:3. God says to Moses, "Go up into the land flowing with milk and honey, but I will not go with you because you are a stiff-necked people, and I might destroy you on the way." Now, you know any stiff-necked people? Why did I just see someone poke their husband? Are you a stiff-necked people? I mean, when you really look at it and you think about it, God says, you go up, I'm not going with you because you guys are so stubborn, I'm going to kill you if I have to spend any time with you. You know anyone like that? I know it's none of you. Moses' response to that. Moses, in Exodus 33:12-15, Moses said to the Lord, "You have told me to lead these people, but you did not say whom you would send with me. You have said to me, I know you well and I am pleased with you. If I have truly pleased you, show me your plans so that I may know you and continue to please you. Remember that this nation is your people." And the Lord answered, "I myself will go with you, and I will give you victory." And then Moses said to him, if you yourself don't go with us, then don't send us away from this place." You see, Moses figured out that he had to make sure that he had God's presence with him. And he waited for the assurance that God was with him. I think too often we think that a quick prayer is all we need. But sometimes God has to work on us so that we will be ready for his presence. Sometimes he has to move in us before we're even ready to take a step. Because let's be honest with each other here. Too often we are stiff-necked people. And too often we want our way. And too often we make plans, we say, God, you got to bless our plans, rather than saying, God, what are your plans? Because he's going to bless those whether we want him to or not. I love the prophets. One of my favorites is Habakkuk, because he spends most of his book complaining to God. Ever complain to God? God, why are things so bad? Why is it so terrible? Come on, what's up with that? And then God answers him in chapter 2. Chapter 2, verse 3, God says to Habakkuk, "For the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it, and it will certainly come and will not delay." Too often we have missed the blessing of God's presence and his power because we have not taken the time necessary to ensure his power. In essence, we have run ahead of God, and he says, wait until I'm ready, and then we can go. I mentioned one daughter last week who was competing in color guard. My other daughter is a senior at Point Loma and is graduating in about a month. And I'm really excited by that. Did not have to pay anymore, but sadly my younger daughter is going there the next year. But when she was about 5, her mother and I made the awesome choice to take her and her 1-year-old sister to the Grand Canyon. You've seen those leashes that they have for kids? I understand that now. We're walking along the edge of the Grand Canyon. You look over a wall and you see this drop of, to my eyes, it looked like about 6 million feet. And my daughter is looking at that, and then she runs ahead to where there's a break in the wall, and we're like, ah, stop. Wait for us, Emily. She'd run ahead of us and didn't understand the dangers that can happen and didn't understand what could be the bad stuff. And too often, I think, like my daughter, we have run ahead of the plans of God, and then we wonder why they don't succeed. The good news is, Isaiah tells us what happens when we do. Passage you're going to recognize, Isaiah 40, 30, 31. But those who wait on the Lord will find new strength. They will fly high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. You see, when we take the necessary time to what the old-time Nazarenes called praying through, God gives us everything that we need to live that abundant life. You see, in both passages, Moses took the time to get on the same page with God. Moses waited until God had prepared the way, both in Moses and in the outside situation, and victory was the result. Paul says in Romans 8:25, but if we hope for what we don't see, we eagerly wait for it with perseverance. So I got another question for you today. What do you need from God today? Personally, what do you need from God today? Have you taken the time to make sure you're on the same page with Him? That you're headed in the same direction? Or are you my 5-year-old running ahead, putting yourself in danger? As a church today, what do you need from God? Have you taken the time to make sure that as a body, you're on the same page with God? Because our instinct in situations like this is to say, let's just get someone new in here and get it taken care of. But sometimes God needs to work in the church before it's ready for a new pastor. What do you need today? What do you need? Have you prayed through until you were sure that you were in the presence of God and had His full support? Do you have the assurance today that God is with you? God's presence is here powerfully right now. And I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to allow you to spend some time talking to Him. In a minute, I'm going to open the altars. And if you would like to come, and maybe you've been holding on to that thing that provides security, whether that's whatever that is for you, and you just need to throw it down. The altar's a great place for that. And maybe you've had something going on and you were running ahead of God and you just need to say, I'm sorry, and help me get back in place. Or maybe you just want to spend some time in His presence today, talking to Him about what's happening at Escondido First Church of the Nazarene. We're going to have some of the worship team come up, and we're going to have an opportunity. I'm going to pray, and then if you would like to come, spend some time talking to Him at the altar. If you're not able to kneel at the altar, you can take one of the front seats. I'd invite you to come. Father, you're moving among us powerfully right now.